Purport. In the Bhagavad Gita 9:7-8, the creation and annihilation of the material world are stated as follows. At the end of each millennium, the creative forces, namely the material nature and the living entities who struggle in the material nature, all merge together into the transcendental body of the Lord, and again, when the Lord desires to manifest them, all of them are again displayed by the Lord. Therefore the material nature is working under the control of the Lord, all of them under the agency of material nature and under the control of the Lord, are thus repeatedly created and annihilated by the will of the Lord. As such, before the creation or manifestation of the material cosmic world, the Lord exists as total energy, Mahasamasti, and thus desiring himself to be diffused to many, he expands himself into multi-total energy, Samasti. From the multi-total energy, he further expands himself in three dimensions, namely Adhyatmic, Adidaivic, and Adibautic, as explained above, Vyasti. As such, the whole creation and the creative energies are non-different and different simultaneously, because everything is an emanation from him, the Mahavishnu or Mahasamasti. Nothing of the cosmic energies is different from him, but all such expanded energies have specific functions and display as designed by the Lord, and therefore they are simultaneously different from the Lord. The living entities are also similar energy, marginal potency of the Lord, and thus they are simultaneously one with and different from him. At the stage of non-manifestation, the living energies remain potent in the Lord, and when they are let loose in the cosmic manifestation, they are exhibited differently in terms of different desires under the modes of nature. Such differential manifestations of the living energies are conditional states of the living entities. The liberated living entities, however, in the Sanatana, eternal manifestation, are unconditionally surrendered souls, and therefore they are not subject to the conditions of creation and annihilation. So this creation takes place by the glance of the Lord from his bedstead of mystic slumber, and thus all the universes and the Lord of the universe, Brahma, are again and again manifested and annihilated. Text 14. Just hear from me how the potency of his lordship divides one into three, called the controlling entities, the controlled entities, and the material bodies, in the manner mentioned above. Text 15. From the sky situated within the transcendental body of the manifesting Mahavishnu, sense energy, mental force, and bodily strength are all generated, as well as the sum total of the fountainhead of the total living force. Text 16. As the followers of a king follow their lords, similarly when the total energy is in motion, all other living entities move, and when the total energy stops endeavoring, all other living entities stop sensual activities. Purport. The individual living entities are completely dependent on the total energy of the Supreme Purusha. No one has independent existence, just as no electric lamp has independent effulgence. Each and every electrical instrument depends fully on the total powerhouse. The total powerhouse depends on the reservoir of water for generating electricity. Water depends on the clouds. The clouds depend on the sun. The sun depends on creation, and creation depends on the movement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of all causes. Text 17. The living force being agitated by the Virat Purusha, generating hunger and thirst, and when he desired to drink and eat, the mouth opened. Purport. The process by which all living beings in the womb of the mother develop their sense organs and sense perceptions appears to follow the same principles in the case of the Virat Purusha, the sum total of all living entities. Therefore, the supreme cause of all generation is not impersonal or without desire. The desires for all kinds of sense perception and sense organs exist in the Supreme, and thus they take place in the individual persons. This desire is the nature of the Supreme Living Being, the Absolute Truth, because he has the sum total of all mouths. The individual living entities have mouths. Similarly, with all other senses and sense organs, here the mouth is the symbolic representation of all sense organs, for the same principles apply to the others also. Text 18. From the mouth the palate became manifested, and thereupon the tongue was also generated. After this all the different tastes came into existence, so that the tongue can relish them. Purport. This gradual process of evolution suggests the explanation of the controlling deities, Adidaiva, because Varuna is the controlling deity for all relishable juices. Therefore the mouth becomes the resting place for the tongue, which tastes all the different juices, of which the controlling deity is Varuna. This suggests therefore that Varuna was also generated along with the development of the tongue. The tongue and the palate, being instrumental, are adibhutam, or forms of matter, but the functioning deity, who is a living entity, is adidaiva, whereas the person undergoing the function is adhyatma. Thus the three categories are also explained as to their birth after the opening of the mouth of the Virat Purusha. The four principles mentioned in this verse serve to explain the three main principles, namely the Adhyatma, Adidaiva, and Adibhutam, as explained before. Text 19. When the Supreme desired to speak, speeches were vibrated from the mouth. Then the controlling deity fire was generated from the mouth. But when he was lying in the water, all these functions remained suspended. Purport. The peculiarity of the gradual development of the different senses is simultaneously supported by their controlling deities. It is to be understood, therefore, that the activities of the sense organs are controlled by the will of the Supreme. The senses are, so to speak, offering a license for the conditioned souls, who are to use them properly under the control of the controlling deity, deputed by the Supreme Lord. One who violates such controlling regulations has to be punished by degradation to a lower status of life. Consider, for example, the tongue and its controlling deity, Varuna. The tongue is meant for eating, and men, animals, and birds each have their different tastes because of different licenses. The taste of human beings and that of the swine are not on the same level. The controlling deity, however, awards or certifies a particular type of body when the particular living entity develops a taste in terms of different modes of nature. If the human being develops taste without discrimination, as does the swine, then the controlling deity is certainly certified for the next term to award him the body of a swine. The swine accepts any kind of foodstuff, including stools, and a human being who has developed such indiscriminate taste must be prepared for a degraded life in the next life. Such a life is also God's grace, because the conditioned soul desired a body like that for perfectly tasting a particular type of foodstuff. If a man gets the body of a swine, it must be considered the grace of the Lord, because the Lord awards the facility. After death, the next body is offered by superior control, not blindly. A human being, therefore, must be on his guard as to what sort of body he is going to have in the next life. An irresponsible life of indiscrimination is risky, and that is the declaration of all scriptures. Text 20. Thereafter, when the Supreme Purusha desired to smell odors, the nostrils and respiration were generated. The nasal instrument and odors came into existence, and the controlling deity of air carrying smell also became manifested. Purport. The nasal instrument, odor, and the controlling deity of air, smelling, etc., all became manifested simultaneously when the Lord desired to smell. The Vedic mantras confirm this statement in the Upanishad's statement that everything is first desired by the Supreme before the subordinate living entity can act upon it. The living entity can see only when the Lord sees, the living entity can smell when the Lord smells, and so on. The idea is that the living entity cannot do anything independently. He can simply think of doing something independently, but he cannot act independently. This independence in thinking is there by the grace of the Lord, but the thinking can be given shape by the grace of the Lord, and therefore the common saying is that man proposes and God disposes. The whole explanation is on the subject of the absolute dependence of the living entities and absolute independence of the Supreme Lord. Less intelligent persons claiming to be on an equal level with God must first prove themselves to be absolute and independent, and then they must substantiate their claim to being one with God. Text 21. Thus, when everything existed in darkness, the Lord desired to see himself and all that was created. Then the eyes, the illuminating sun god, the power of vision, and the object of sight all became manifested. Purport: the universe is by nature dense darkness, and therefore the total creation is called tamas, or darkness. The night is the real feature of the universe, for then one cannot see anything, including oneself. The Lord, out of his causeless mercy, first desired to see himself, and all the creation as well, and thus the sun became manifested. The power of vision for all living entities became possible, and the objects of vision were also manifested. This means that the whole phenomenal world became visible after the creation of the sun. Text 22. By development of the desire of the great sages of know, the ears, power of hearing, the controlling deity of hearing, and the objects of hearing became manifested. The great sages desired to hear about the self. Purport: as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, by advancement of knowledge, one should try to know about the Supreme Lord, the summum bonum of everything. Knowledge does not mean knowledge only of the laws of nature, or physical knowledge, which are working by the direction of the Lord. The scientists are eager to hear about the physical laws working in material nature. They are eager to hear through the medium of radio and television about things taking place far away from them on other planets, but they should know that the power of hearing and the instruments for hearing were given to them by the Lord for hearing about the self, or about the Lord. Unfortunately, the power of hearing is misused in hearing the vibrations of mundane affairs. The great sages were interested in hearing about the Lord through Vedic knowledge and nothing more. That is the beginning of oral reception of knowledge. Text 23. When there was a desire to perceive the physical characteristics of matter, such as softness, hardness, warmth, cold, lightness, and heaviness, the background of sensation, the skin pores, the hairs on the body, and their controlling deities, the trees, were generated. Within and outside the skin is a covering of air through which sense perception became prominent. Purport: the physical characteristics of matter, such as softness, are subjects of sense perception, and thus physical knowledge is the subject matter of the touch sensation. One can measure the temperature of matter by touching with the hand, and one can measure the weight of an object by lifting it with the hand, and thus estimate its heaviness or lightness. The skin pores, and the hairs on the body are all interdependent with the touch sensation. The air blowing within and outside the skin is also an object of sense perception. This sense perception is also a source of knowledge, and therefore it is suggested here that physical or physiological knowledge is subordinate to the knowledge of the self, as above mentioned. Knowledge of self can expand to the knowledge of phenomena, but physical knowledge cannot lead to knowledge of the self. There is, however, an intimate relation between the hairs on the body and the vegetation on the body of the earth. The vegetables are nourishment for the skin, both as food and medicine, as stated in the third canto. Tvacham asya vinurbinam vivishur dishnyam usaddi. Text 24. Thereafter, when the Supreme Person desired to perform varieties of work, the two hands in their controlling strength, and Indra, the demigod in heaven, became manifested, as also the acts dependent on both the hands and the demigod. Purport: in every item we can note with profit that the sense organs of the living entity are never independent at any stage. The Lord is known as the Lord of the senses, Hrishikesha. Thus the sense organs of the living entities are manifested by the will of the Lord, and each organ is controlled by a certain type of demigod. No one therefore can claim any proprietorship of the senses. The living entity is controlled by the senses are controlled by the demigods, and the demigods are the servants of the Supreme Lord. That is the arrangement in the system of creation. The whole thing is controlled ultimately by the Supreme Lord, and there is no independence either of the material nature or of the living entity. The illusioned living entity who claims to be the lord of his senses is under the clutches of the external energy of the Lord. As long as the living entity continues to be puffed up by his tiny existence, he is to be understood to be under the stringent control of the external energy of the Lord, and there is no question of liberation from the clutches of illusion, Maya, however much one may declare himself a liberated soul. Text 25. Thereupon, because of his desiring to control movement, his legs became manifested, and from the legs the controlling deity named Vishnu was generated. By his personal supervision of this act, all varieties of human being are busily engaged in dutiful occupational sacrifice. Purport. Every human being is engaged in his particular occupational duty, and such activities are visible as men go hither and thither. This is very prominently visible in big cities of the world. People are going all over the cities with great concern, from one place to another. This movement is not limited only to the cities, but is also visible outside the cities, from one place to another, or from one city to another, by different means of vehicles. Men are moving by cars and rails on the roads, by subways within the earth, and by planes in the sky, for the purpose of business success. But in all these movements, the real purpose is to earn wealth for comfortable life. For this comfortable life, the scientist is engaged, the artist is engaged, the engineer is engaged, the technician is engaged, all in different branches of human activity, but they do not know how to make the activities purposeful to fulfill the mission of human life. Because they do not know this secret, all their activities are targeted towards the goal of sense gratification without control, and therefore by all this business they are unknowingly entering into the deep regions of darkness. Because they have been captivated by the external energy of the Supreme Lord, they have completely forgotten the Supreme Lord Vishnu, and thus they have taken it for granted that this life, as presently manifested under the conditions of material nature, is all in all for enjoying the highest amount of sense gratification. But such a wrong conception of life cannot give anyone the desired peace of mind, and thus, in spite of all advancement in knowledge by use of the resources of nature, no one is happy in this material civilization. The secret is that at every step they should try to execute sacrifices toward the path of world peace. The Bhagavad Gita 18:45-46 also advises the same secret in the following verses. The Lord said to Arjuna, "Just hear from me how one can attain the highest perfection in life simply by discharging his specified occupational duty. Man can attain the highest perfection of life by worshipping the Supreme Lord, and by performing sacrifice for the sake of the Supreme Lord Vishnu, who is all-pervading, and by whose control every living being acquires his desired facilities according to his personal propensity. There is no harm in having different propensities in life, because every human being is proportionately independent to chalk out the plan of his life by different occupations, but one should make it a point in his life to know perfectly well that he is not independent absolutely. One is certainly under the control of the Supreme Lord and under different agencies. Knowing this, one should make it a point that by his work and the result of his labor he serves the Supreme Lord as prescribed by the authorities expert in the transcendental loving service of the Supreme Lord Vishnu. For performing such occupational duties of life, the leg is the most important instrument of the body, because without the help of the legs, one cannot move from one place to another, and therefore the Lord has special control over the legs of all human beings, which are meant for performing yajnas. Text 26. Thereupon, for sexual pleasure, begetting offspring, and tasting heavenly nectar, the Lord developed the genitals, and thus there is the genital organ and its controlling deity, the Prajapati. The object of sexual pleasure and the controlling deity are under the control of the genitals of the Lord. Purport. The heavenly pleasure for the conditioned soul is sexual pleasure, and this pleasure is tasted by the genitals. The woman is the object of sexual pleasure, and both the sense perception of sexual pleasure and the woman are controlled by the Prajapati, who is under the control of the Lord's genitals. The impersonalist must know from this verse that the Lord is not impersonal, for he has his genitals, on which all the pleasurable objects of sex depend. No one would have taken the trouble to maintain children if there were no taste of heavenly nectar by means of sexual intercourse. This material world is created to give the conditioned souls a chance for rejuvenation, for going back home, back to Godhead, and therefore generation of the living being is necessary for upkeep of the purpose of creation. Sexual pleasure is an impetus for such action, and as such, one can even serve the Lord in the act of such sexual pleasure. The service is counted when the children born of such sexual pleasure are properly trained in God consciousness. The whole idea of material creation is to revive the dormant God consciousness of the living entity. In forms of life other than the human form, sexual pleasure is prominent without any motive of service for the mission of the Lord. But in the human form of life, the conditioned soul can render service to the Lord by creating progeny suitable for the attainment of salvation. One can beget hundreds of children and enjoy the celestial pleasure of sexual intercourse, provided he is able to train the children in God consciousness. Otherwise, begetting children is on the level of the swine. Rather, the swine is more expert than the human being because the swine can beget a dozen piglets at a time, whereas the human being can give birth to only one at a time. So one should always remember that the genitals, sexual pleasure, the woman, and the offspring are all related in the service of the Lord, and one who forgets this relationship in the service of the Supreme Lord becomes subjected to the threefold miseries of material existence by the laws of nature. Perception of sexual pleasure is there even in the body of the dog, but there is no sense of God consciousness. The human form of life is distinct from that of the dog by the perception of God consciousness. Text 27. Thereafter, when he desired to evacuate the refuse of edibles, the evacuating hole, anus, and the sensory organ thereof, developing along with the controlling deity Mitra, the sensory organ and the evacuating substance are both under the shelter of the controlling deity. Purport: even in the matter of evacuating stool, the refuse is controlled, so how can the living entity claim to be independent? Text 28. Thereafter, when he desired to move from one body to another, the navel and the air of departure and death were combinedly created. The navel is the shelter for both, namely death and the separating force. Purport: the pranavayu continues the life, and the apanavayu stops the living force. Both the vibrations are generated from the abdominal hole, the navel. This navel is the joint from one body to the other. Lord Brahma was born of the abdominal hole of Garbhodakashayi Vishnu as a separate body, and the same principle is followed even in the birth of any ordinary body. The body of the child develops from the body of the mother, and when the child is separated from the body of the mother, it is separated by cutting the navel joint, and that is the way the Supreme Lord manifested himself as separated many. The living entities are therefore separated parts, and thus they have no independence. Text 29. When there was a desire to have food and drink, the abdomen and the intestines and also the arteries became manifested. The rivers and seas are the source of their sustenance and metabolism. Purport: the controlling deities of the intestines are the rivers, and those of the arteries the seas. Fulfillment of the belly with food and drink is the cause of sustenance, and the metabolism of the food and drink replaces the waste of the bodily energies. Therefore the body's health is dependent on healthy actions of the intestines and the arteries. The rivers and the seas, being the controlling deities of the two, keep the intestines and the arteries in healthy order. Text 30. When there was a desire to think about the activities of his own energy, then the heart, the seat of the mind, the moon, determination, and all desire became manifested. Purport: the heart of every living entity is the seat of the Supersoul, Paramatma, a plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Without his presence, the living entity cannot get into the working energy according to his past deeds. The living entities who are conditioned in the material world are manifested in the creation in terms of respective inclinations inherent in them, and the requisite material body is offered to each and every one of them by the material energy under the direction of the Supersoul. This is explained in the Bhagavad Gita 9:10. When therefore the Supersoul is situated in the heart of the conditioned soul, the requisite mind is manifested in the conditioned soul, and he becomes conscious of his occupation, as one is conscious of his duty after waking up from slumber. Therefore the material mind of the living entity develops when the Supersoul sits on his heart, after which the mind, the controlling deity, moon, and then the activities of the mind, namely thinking, feeling, and willing, all take place. The activities of the mind cannot begin without the manifestation of the heart, and the heart becomes manifested when the Lord wants to see the activities of the material creation. Text 31. The 7 elements of the body, namely the thin layer on the skin itself, the flesh, blood, fat, marrow, and bone, are all made of earth, water, and fire, whereas the life breath is produced by the sky, water, and air. Purport. The construction of the whole material world is prominently made by 3 elements, namely earth, water, and fire, but the living force is produced by the sky, air, and water. So water is the common element in both the gross and subtle forms of all material creation, and it should be noted herewith that due to necessity, water, being most prominent in the material creation, is the principal element of all the 5. This material body is thus an embodiment of the 5 elements, and the gross manifestation is perceived because of 3, namely earth, water, and fire. Sensations of touch are perceived, due to the thin layer on the skin, and bone is as good as hard stone. The breathing air of life is produced of sky, air, and water, and therefore open air, regular bath, and ample space in which to live are favorable for healthy vitality. Fresh produce from the earth, like grains and vegetables, as well as fresh water and heat, is good for the upkeep of the gross body. Text 32. The sense organs are attached to the modes of material nature, and the modes of material nature are products of the false ego. The mind is subjected to all kinds of material experiences, happiness and distress, and the intelligence is the feature of the mind's deliberation. Purport. Illusioned by the material nature, the living entity identifies with false ego. More clearly, when the living entity is entrapped by the material body, he at once identifies with the bodily relationships, forgetting his own identity as spirit soul. This false ego associates with different modes of material nature, and thus the senses become attached to the modes of material nature. Mind is the instrument for feeling different material experiences, but intelligence is deliberative and can change everything for the better. The intelligent person, therefore, can attain salvation from the illusion of material existence by proper use of intelligence. An intelligent person can detect the awkward position of material existence, and thus begin to inquire as to what he is, why he is subjected to different kinds of miseries, and how to get rid of all miseries, and thus, by good association, an advanced intelligent person can turn towards the better life of self-realization. It is advised, therefore, that an intelligent person associate with the great sages and saints who are on the path of salvation. By such association, one can receive instructions which are able to slacken the conditioned soul's attachment for matter. And thus the intelligent man gradually gets rid of the illusion of matter and false ego and is promoted to the real life of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. Text 33. Thus by all this, the external feature of the personality of Godhead is covered by gross forms such as those of planets, which were explained to you by me. Purport. As explained in the Bhagavad Gita 7:4, the separated material energy of the personality of Godhead is covered by 8 kinds of material coverings: earth, water, fire, air, sky, mind, intelligence, and false ego. All these are emanations from the personality of Godhead as his external energy. These coverings are just like the covering of clouds for the sun. The cloud is a creation of the sun, yet it actually covers the eyes so that one cannot see the sun. The sun cannot be covered by the clouds. The cloud can at utmost extend a few hundreds of miles in the sky, but the sun is far greater than millions of miles, so 100-mile covering is not competent to cover millions of miles. Therefore, one of the various energies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot, of course, cover the Lord. But these coverings are created by him to cover the eyes of the conditioned souls who want to lord it over the material nature. Actually, the conditioned souls are covered by the illusory creative cloud of matter, and the Lord reserves the right of not being exposed to their eyes. Because they have no eyes of transcendental vision, and because they cannot see the personality of Godhead, they therefore deny the existence of the Lord and the transcendental form of the Lord. The covering of the gigantic material feature is accepted by such men with a poor fund of knowledge, and how this is so is explained in the following verse. Text 34. Therefore, beyond this gross manifestation is a transcendental manifestation, finer than the finest form. It has no beginning, no intermediate stage, and no end. Therefore, it is beyond the limits of expression or mental speculation, and is distinct from the material conception. Purport. The gross external body of the Supreme is manifested at certain intervals, and thus the external feature or form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not the external form of the Lord, which has no beginning, no intermediate stage, and no end. Anything which has a beginning, interim, and end is called material. The material world is begun from the Lord, and thus the form of the Lord, before the beginning of the material world, is certainly transcendental to the finest or the finer material conception. The ether in the material world is considered to be the finest. Finer than the ether is mind, intelligence, and false ego. But all 8 of the outward coverings are explained as outer coverings of the Absolute Truth. The Absolute Truth is therefore beyond the expression and speculation of the material conception. He is certainly transcendental to all material conceptions. This is called nirviseshanam. One should not, however, misunderstand nirviseshanam as being without any transcendental qualifications. Viseshanam means qualities. Therefore, nir added to it means that he has no material qualities or variegatedness. This nullifying expression is described in 4 transcendental qualifications, namely unmanifested, transcendental, eternal, and beyond the conception of mind or word. Beyond the limits of words means negation of the material conception. Unless one is transcendentally situated, it is not possible to know the transcendental form of the Lord. Text 35. Neither of the above forms of the Lord, as just described unto you from the material angle of vision, is accepted by the pure devotees of the Lord who know him well. Purport. The impersonalists think of the absolute personality of Godhead in 2 different ways, as above mentioned. On the one hand, they worship the Lord in his Vishvarupa, or all-pervading universal form, and on the other, they think of the Lord's unmanifested, indescribable, subtle form. The theories of pantheism and monism are respectively applicable to these 2 conceptions of the Supreme as gross and subtle, but both of them are rejected by the learned pure devotees of the Lord, because they are aware of the factual position. This is very clearly mentioned in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which records Arjuna's experience of the Vishvarupa of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. Adrishta purvam hrisitosmi dirstva bhayanacha pravyatitam manome tad eva me darsayam devarupam prasiddha devasya jagannivasa. Bhagavad Gita 11:45. Arjuna, as a pure devotee of the Lord, never previously saw the contemplated universal form of the Lord, Vishvarupa, but when he did see it, his curiosities were satisfied. But he was not happy to see such a form of the Lord because of his attachment as a pure devotee. He was afraid to see the gigantic form of the Lord. He therefore prayed to the Lord to assume his 4-handed Narayana or Krishna form, which alone could please Arjuna. Undoubtedly, the Lord has the supreme potency to exhibit himself in multifarious forms, but the pure devotees of the Lord are interested in his forms as eternally exhibited in the abode of the Lord, known as the Tripad Vibhuti, or Kingdom of God. The Lord in the Tripad Vibhuti abode exhibits himself in two forms, either with 4 hands or with 2 hands. The Vishvarupa exhibited in the material manifestation has unlimited hands and unlimited dimensions, with everything unlimited. The pure devotees of the Lord worship him in his Vaikuntha forms as Narayana or Krishna. Sometimes the same Vaikuntha forms of the Lord are in the material world also, by his grace as Sri Ram, Sri Krishna, Sri Narasimhadeva, etc., and thus the pure devotees also worship them. Usually the features shown in the material world have no existence in the Vaikuntha planets, and thus they are not accepted by the pure devotees. What the pure devotees worship from the very beginning are eternal forms of the Lord, existing in the Vaikuntha planets. The non-devotee impersonalists imagine the material forms of the Lord, and ultimately they merge in the impersonal Brahmajyoti of the Lord, whereas the pure devotees of the Lord are worshippers of the Lord both in the beginning and also in the perfect stage of salvation eternally. The worship of the pure devotee never stops, whereas the worship of the impersonalist stops after his attainment of salvation, when he merges in the impersonal form of the Lord, known as the Brahmajyoti. Therefore, the pure devotees of the Lord are described here as Vipaschita, or the learned who are in the knowledge of the Lord perfectly. Text 36. He, the personality of Godhead, manifests himself in a transcendental form, being the subject of his transcendental name, quality, pastimes, entourage, and transcendental variegatedness. Although he is unaffected by all such activities, he appears to be so engaged. Purport. Whenever there is a need of material creation, the transcendental personality of Godhead accepts forms in the material world for creation, maintenance, and destruction. One should be intelligent enough to know his activities in truth, and not be biased to conclude that he descends to the material world by accepting a form created by material nature. Any form accepted from the material nature has its affection for everything done in the material world. A conditioned soul who accepts a material form for undergoing a certain term of material activities is subjected to the laws of matter. But here in this verse it is clearly stated that although the forms and activities of the Lord appear to be the same as those of a conditioned soul, they are supernatural and impossible for the conditioned soul. He, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is always unaffected by such activities. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says, Namam karmani limpanti name karma palhe pirha itimam yo bijanate karma birnasa bhavayate. The Lord is never affected by the activities which he apparently performs by his different incarnations and personalities, nor does he have any desire to achieve success by fruitive activities. The Lord is full by his different potencies of wealth, strength, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation, and thus he has no reason for physical exertion like the conditioned soul. Therefore, an intelligent person who can distinguish between the transcendental activities of the Lord and the activities of the conditioned souls is also not bound by the reactions of activities. The Lord, as Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva, conducts the 3 modes of material nature. From Vishnu is born Brahma, and from Brahma is born Shiva. Sometimes Brahma is a separated part of Vishnu, and sometimes Brahma is Vishnu himself. Thus Brahma creates the different species of life all over the universe, which means that the Lord creates the whole manifestation either by himself or through the agency of his authorized deputies. Texts 37 through 40. O King, know that from me that all living entities are created by the Supreme Lord according to their past deeds. This includes Brahma and his sons Daksha, the periodical heads like Vaishvashvata Manu, the demigods like Indra, Chandra, and Varuna, the great sages like Bhargu, Vyasa, and Vashishta, the inhabitants of Pitraloka and Siddhaloka, and Charanas, Gandharvas, Vidyadharas, Asharas, Yakshas, Kinnaras, and angels, the serpentines, the monkey-shaped Kimpurushas, the human beings, the inhabitants of Matraloka, the demons, Pisachas, ghosts, spirits, lunatics, and evil spirits, the good and evil stars, the goblins, the animals in the forest, the birds, the household animals, the reptiles, the mountains, the moving and standing living entities, the living entities born from embryos, from eggs, from perspiration, and from seeds, and all others, whether they be in the water, land, or sky, in happiness, in distress, or in mixed happiness and distress, all of them, according to their past deeds, are created by the Supreme Lord. Purport. The varieties of living entities are mentioned in this list, and with no exception from the topmost planet down to the lowest planet of the universe, all of them, in different species of life, are created by the Almighty Father, Vishnu. Therefore no one is independent of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the Bhagavad Gita 14.4, the Lord therefore claims all living entities as his offspring in the following verse. Sharvayonishu kanteya murtaya sambhavantiya tasam brahma mahadyonir aham bija pradapita. The material nature is compared to the mother. Although every living being is seen to come out of the mother's body, it is still a fact that the mother is not the ultimate cause of such a birth. The father is the ultimate cause of birth. Without the father's seed, no mother can give birth to a child. Therefore the living beings in different varieties of forms and positions within the innumerable universes are all born of the seeds of the Almighty Father, the personality of Godhead. And only to the man with a poor fund of knowledge they appear to be born of the material nature. Being under the material energy of the Supreme Lord, all living entities beginning from Brahma down to the insignificant ant are manifested in different bodies according to their past deeds. The material nature is one of the energies of the Lord, Bhagavad Gita 7.4. The material nature is inferior in comparison to the living entities, the superior nature. The superior nature and inferior nature of the Lord combine to manifest all universal affairs. Some of the living entities are relatively happy in better conditions of life, whereas others are in distressed conditions of life, but factually none of them are actually happy in material conditional life. No one can be happy in prison life, although one may be a first-class prisoner and another a third-class prisoner. The intelligent person should not try to be promoted from third-class prison life to first-class prison life, but should try to be released from the prison altogether. One may be promoted to first-class prisoner, but the same first-class prisoner is again degraded to a third-class prisoner in the next term. One should try to be free from prison life and go back home, back to Godhead. That is the real goal for all types of living entities. Text 41. According to the different modes of material nature, the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, and the mode of darkness, there are different living creatures, who are known as demigods, human beings, and hellish living entities. O king, even a particular mode of nature, being mixed with the other two, is divided into three, and thus each kind of living creature is influenced by the other modes and acquires its habits also. Purport. The living entities individually are being conducted by a particular mode of nature, but at the same time there is every chance of their being influenced by the other two. Generally, all conditioned souls in the material encagement are influenced by the mode of passion because every one of them is trying to lord it over the material nature to fulfill his individual desire. But in spite of the individual mode of passion, there is always the chance of being influenced by the other modes of nature by association. If one is in good association, he can develop the mode of goodness, and if in bad association, he may develop the mode of darkness or ignorance. Nothing is stereotyped. One can change his habit by good or bad association, and one has to become intelligent enough to discriminate between good and bad. The best association is the service of the devotees of the Lord. and by that association one can become the highest qualified man by the grace of the Lord's pure devotees. As we have already seen in the life of Srila Narada Muni, he became the topmost devotee of the Lord simply by the association of pure devotees of the Lord. By birth he was the son of a maidservant, and had no knowledge of his father, and no academic education, even of the lowest status, but simply by associating with the devotees, and by eating the remnants of their foodstuff, he gradually developed the transcendental qualities of the devotees. By such association his taste for chanting and hearing the transcendental glories of the Lord became prominent, and because the glories of the Lord are non-different from the Lord, he got direct association with the Lord by means of sound representation. Similarly, there is the life of Ajamila, 6th Canto, who was the son of a Brahmana and was educated and trained properly in the discharge of the duties of a Brahmana, but who in spite of all this, because he contacted the bad association of a prostitute, was put into the path of the lowest quality of Chandala, or the last position for a human being. Therefore the Bhagavatam always recommends the association of the Mahat, or the Great Soul, for opening the gate of salvation. To associate with persons engaged in lording it over the material world means to enter into the darkest region of hell. One should try to raise himself by the association of the Great Soul. That is the way of the perfection of life. Text 42. He, the personality of Godhead, as the maintainer of all the universe, appears in different incarnations after establishing the creation, and thus he reclaims all kinds of conditioned souls amongst the humans, the non-humans, and the demigods. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, incarnates himself in different societies of living entities to reclaim them from the clutches of illusion, and such activities of the Lord are not limited only to human society. He incarnates himself even as a fish, hog, tree, and many other forms, but less intelligent persons who have no knowledge of him deride him, even if he is in human society as a human being. The Lord therefore says in the Bhagavad Gita 9:11, Avajanante mam muddha manushim tannum asritam param bhavam ajananto mamabutta maheshvaram. As we have already discussed in the previous verses, it is concluded that the Lord is never a product of the material creation. His transcendental position is always unchanged. He is the eternal form of knowledge and bliss, and he executes his almighty will by his different energies. As such, he is never the subject of reactions for any of his acts. He is transcendental to all such conceptions of actions and reactions, even if he is visible in the material world. The exhibition is only of his internal energy, for he is above the good and bad conceptions of this material world. In the material world, the fish or the hog may be considered lower than the man, but when the Lord appears as a fish or hog, he is neither of them in the material conception. It is his causeless mercy that he appears in every society or species of life, but he is never to be considered one of them. Conceptions of the material world, such as good and bad, lower and upper, important and insignificant, are estimations of the material energy, and the Supreme Lord is transcendental to all such conceptions. The words parambhavam, or transcendental nature, can never be compared to the material conception. We should not forget that the potencies of the Almighty Lord are always the same, and do not decrease because the Lord assumes the form of a lower animal. There is no difference between Lord Sri Ram, Lord Sri Krishna, and his incarnations as a fish and hog. He is all-pervading and simultaneously localized at any and every place. But the foolish person with a poor fund of knowledge, for want of that parambhavam of the Lord, cannot understand how the Supreme Lord can take the form of a man or a fish. One compares everything to one's own standard of knowledge, as the frog in the well considers the sea to be like the well. The frog in the well cannot even think of the sea, and when such a frog is informed of the greatness of the sea, it takes the conception of the sea as being a little greater than the well. As such, one who is foolish about the transcendental science of the Lord will find it difficult to understand how Lord Vishnu can equally manifest himself in every society of living entities. Text 43. Thereafter, at the end of the millennium, the Lord himself, in the form of Rudra, the destroyer, will annihilate the complete creation as the wind displaces the clouds. Purport. This creation is very appropriately compared to clouds. Clouds are created or situated in the sky, and when they are displaced, they remain in the same sky without manifestation. Similarly, the whole creation is made by the Supreme Personality of God in his form of Brahma. It is maintained by him in the form of Vishnu, and it is destroyed by him in the form of Rudra or Shiva, all in due course. This creation, maintenance, and destruction are nicely explained in the Bhagavad Gita 8:19-20 as follows. Bhuttagramma sa evayam bhutva praliyate yatri agame vasya partha prabhavati aharagame parastasmatu bhavonyo vyaktat sanatana ya sa sarveshu bhutteshu nasyatso nad vinasyati. The nature of the material world is that it is first created very nicely, then it develops very nicely, and stays for a great number of years, even beyond the calculation of the greatest mathematician. But after that it is again destroyed during the night of Brahma, without any resistance, and at the end of the night of Brahma it is again manifested as a creation, to follow the same principles of maintenance and destruction. The foolish conditioned soul who has taken this temporary world as a permanent settlement has to learn intelligently why such creation and destruction take place. The fruitive actors in the material world are very enthusiastic in the creation of big enterprises, big houses, big empires, big industries, and so many big things out of the energy and ingredients supplied by the material agent of the Supreme Lord. With such resources, and at the cost of valuable energy, the conditioned soul creates, satisfies his whims, but unwillingly has to depart from all his creations and enter into another phase of life to create again and again. To give hope to such foolish conditioned souls who waste their energy in this temporary material world, the Lord gives information that there is another nature, which is eternally existent without being occasionally created or destroyed, and that the conditioned soul can understand what he should do and how his valuable energy may be utilized. Instead of wasting his energy in matter, which is sure to be destroyed in due course by the Supreme Will, the conditioned soul should utilize his energy in the devotional service of the Lord, so that he can be transferred to the other eternal nature, where there is no birth, no death, no creation, no destruction, but permanent life instead, full of knowledge and unlimited bliss. The temporary creation is thus exhibited and destroyed just to give information to the conditioned soul, who is attached to temporary things. It is also meant to give him a chance for self-realization, and not for sense gratification, which is the prime aim of all fruitive actors. Text 44. The great transcendentalists thus describe the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but the pure devotees deserve to see more glorious things in transcendence beyond these features. Purport. The Lord is not only the creator and destroyer of the material manifestations of his different energies, he is more than a simple creator and destroyer, for there is his feature of Ananda, or his pleasure feature. This pleasure feature of the Lord is understood by the pure devotees only, and not by others. The impersonalist is satisfied simply by understanding the all-pervasive influence of the Lord. This is called Brahman realization. Greater than the impersonalist is the mystic who sees the Lord situated in his heart as Paramatma, the partial representation of the Lord. But there are pure devotees who take part in the direct pleasure, Ananda, potency of the Lord, by factual reciprocation of loving service. The Lord, in his abode called the Vaikuntha planets, which are eternal manifestations, always remains with his associates, and enjoys transcendental loving services by his pure devotees in different transcendental humors. The pure devotees of the Lord thus undergo a practice of that devotional service to the Lord during the manifestation of the creation, and take full advantage of the manifestation by qualifying themselves to enter into the kingdom of God. The Bhagavad Gita 18:55 confirms this. Bhaktyamam abhijanati yavanyaschasme tatvata tatumam tattvato jnatva visate tad anantaram. By development of pure devotional service, one can factually know the Lord as he is, and thus be trained in the bona fide service of the Lord, and be allowed to enter into the direct association of the Lord in so many capacities. The highest glorious association with the Lord is made possible in the planet of Goloka Vrindavana, where Lord Krishna enjoys himself with the gopis and his favorite animals, the Surabi cows. A description of this transcendental land of Krishna is given in the Brahma Samhita, which is considered by Lord Sri Chaitanya to be the most authentic literature in this connection. Text 45. There is no direct engineering by the Lord for the creation and destruction of the material world. What is described in the Vedas about his direct interference is simply to counteract the idea that material nature is the creator. Purport. The Vedic direction for this creation, maintenance, and destruction of the material world is this: Yatova imani bhutani jayante, yanajatani jivanti, yat prayanti abhisamvisanti, i.e., everything is created by Brahman, after creation everything is maintained by Brahman, and after annihilation everything is conserved in Brahman. Gross materialists without any knowledge of Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan conclude material nature to be the ultimate cause of the material manifestation, and the modern scientist also shares this view that the material nature is the ultimate cause of all the manifestations of the material world. This view is refuted by all Vedic literature. The Vedanta philosophy mentions that Brahman is the fountainhead of all creation, maintenance, and destruction, and Srimad Bhagavatam, the natural commentation on the Vedanta philosophy, says, Janmadi asya yato nyavyad itaratas chartashiv abhijna svarat, etc. Inert matter is undoubtedly energy with the potential to interact, but it has no initiative of its own. Srimad Bhagavatam therefore comments on the aphorism Janmade Asya by saying Abhijna and Svarat, i.e., the Supreme Brahman is not inert matter, but he is Supreme Consciousness and is independent. Therefore inert matter cannot be the ultimate cause of the creation, maintenance, and destruction of the material world. Superficially, material nature appears to be the cause of creation, maintenance, and destruction, but material nature is set into motion for creation by the Supreme Conscious Being, the Personality of Godhead. He is the background of all creation, maintenance, and destruction, and this is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 9.10. Mayadyaksena prakriti suyate sacharacharam hetunanena kanteya jagad viparvatate. The material nature is one of the energies of the Lord, and she can work under the direction of the Lord, Adyakshena, but the Lord throws his transcendental glance over the material nature. Then only can the material nature act, as a father contacts the mother, who is then able to conceive a child. Although it appears to the layman that the mother gives birth to the child, the experienced man knows that the father gives birth to the child. The material nature, therefore, produces the moving and standing manifestations of the material world after being contacted by the Supreme Father, and not independently. Considering material nature to be the cause of creation, maintenance, etc., is called the logic of nipples on the neck of a goat. The Chaitanya Charitamrita by Srila Krishnadasa Kaviraja Goswami describes this logic of Ajagalastana Nyaya as follows, as explained by His Divine Grace, Sri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Goswami Maharaja. The material nature, as the material cause, is known as pradana, and as efficient cause is known as maya. But since it is inert matter, it is not the remote cause of creation. Kaviraja Goswami states as follows, Atayeva Krishna Mula Jagat Karana Prakriti Karanya Yache Ajagalastana. Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi 561. Because Karanarnavasai Vishnu is a plenary expansion of Krishna, it is he who electrifies the matter to put it in motion. The example of electrification is quite appropriate. A piece of iron is certainly not fire, but when the iron is made red hot, certainly it has the quality of fire through its burning capacity. Matter is compared to the piece of iron, and it is electrified or made red hot by the glance or manipulation of the Supreme Consciousness of Vishnu. Only by such electrification is the energy of matter displayed in various actions and reactions. Therefore the inert matter is neither efficient nor the material cause of the cosmic manifestation. Sri Kapila Devat has said, Yatomukad Vishpalingad Domadvapi Sva Sambhavat Api Atmatvanabhimatad Yathagni Purtag Ulmukat. Srimad Bhagavatam 3:28-40. The original fire, its flame, its sparks, and its smoke are all one, for fire is still fire, yet it is different from the flame. Flame is different from sparks, and sparks are different from the smoke. In every one of them, namely in the flames, in the sparks, and in the smoke, the integrity of fire is present, yet all of them are differently situated with different positions. The cosmic manifestation is compared to the smoke, because when smoke passes over the sky, so many forms appear, resembling many known and unknown manifestations. The sparks are compared to living entities, and the flames are compared to material nature, pradana. One must know that each and every one of them is effective simply because of being empowered by the quality of the original fire. Therefore all of them, namely the material nature, the cosmic manifestation, and the living entities, are but different energies of the Lord, fire. Therefore those who accept the material nature as the cosmic manifestation's original cause, Prakriti, the cause of creation according to Sankhya philosophy, are not correct in their conclusion. The material nature has no separate existence without the Lord. Therefore, setting aside the Supreme Lord as the cause of all causes is the logic of Ajagalastananyaya, or trying to milk the nipples of the neck of a goat. The nipples on the neck of a goat may seem like sources of milk, but to try to get milk from such nipples will be foolish. Text 46. This process of creation and annihilation described in summary herein is the regulative principle during the duration of Brahma's one day. It is also the regulative principle in the creation of Mahat, in which the material nature is dispersed. Purport. There are three different types of creation called Mahakalpa, Vikalpa, and Kalpa. In the Mahakalpa, the Lord assumes the first Purusha incarnation as Karanyodakasai Vishnu, with all the potencies of the Mahatattva and the 16 principles of creative matter and instruments. The creative instruments are 11, the ingredients are 5, and all of them are products of Mahat, or materialistic ego. These creations by the Lord, in his feature of Karanyodakasai Vishnu, are called Mahakalpa. The creation of Brahma and dispersion of the material ingredients are called Vikalpa, and the creation by Brahma in each day of his life is called Kalpa. Therefore each day of Brahma is called a kalpa, and there are 30 kalpas in terms of Brahma's days. This is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 8:17 as follows. Sahasra Yoga Paryantam Aharyad Brahmano Vidu Yatrim Yoga Sahasrantam Teho Ratra Vido Janna. In the upper planetary system, the duration of one complete day and night is equal to one complete year of this earth. This is accepted even by the modern scientist and attested by the astronauts. Similarly, in the region of still higher planetary systems, the duration of day and night is still greater than the heavenly planets. The 4 yugas are calculated in terms of the heavenly calendars, and accordingly are 12,000 years in terms of the heavenly planets. This is called a Divya Yuga, and 1,000 Divya Yugas make one day of Brahma. The creation during the day of Brahma is called Kalpa, and the creation of Brahma is called Vikalpa. When Vikalpas are made possible by the breathing of Mahavishnu, this is called a Mahakalpa. There are regular and systematic cycles of these Mahakalpas, Vikalpas, and Kalpas. In answer to Maharaja Parikshit's question about them, Sukadeva Goswami answered in the Prabhasakanda of the Skanda Purana. They are as follows. Therefore the 30 kalpas of Brahma are 1. Svetakalpa, 2. Nilalohita, 3. Vamadeva, 4. Gatantara, 5. Rarava, 6. Prana, 7. Birhatkalpa, 8. Kandarpa, 9. Sadyota, 10. Isana, 11. Jnana, 12. Sarasvata, 13. Udana, 14. Garuda, 15. Karma, 16. Narasimha, 17. Samadhi, 18. Agneya, 19. Vishnuja, 20. Saura, 21. Somakalpa, 22. Bhavana, 23. Supuma, 24. Vaikuntha, 25. Archisa, 26. Valikalpa, 27. Vairaja, 28. Gaurikalpa, 29. Maheshvara, 30. Paitrakalpa. These are Brahma's days only, and he has to live months and years up to 100, so we can just imagine how many creations there are in kalpas only. Then again there are vikalpas, which are generated by the breathing of Mahavishnu, as stated in the Brahma Samhita, Yasyaika nisvasita kalam atamvalambhya jivanti loma vilaja jagadanda natta. The Brahmas live only during the breathing period of Mahavishnu, so the exhaling and inhaling of Vishnu are Mahakalpas, and all these are due to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for no one else is the master of all creations. Text 47. O King, I shall in due course explain the measurement of time and its gross and subtle features, with the specific symptoms of each, but for the present let me explain unto you the Padmakalpa. Purport. The present duration of a kalpa of Brahma is called the Varaha Kalpa, or Svetavaraha Kalpa, because the incarnation of the Lord as Varaha took place during the creation of Brahma, who was born on the lotus coming out of the abdomen of Vishnu. Therefore this Varaha Kalpa is also called Padma Kalpa, and this is testified by the Acharyas like Jiva Goswami, as well as Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakura, in pursuance of the first commentator, Swami Sridhara. So there is no contradiction between the Varaha and the Padmakalpa of Brahma. Text 48. Sanaka Rishi, after hearing all about the creation, inquired from Sutta Goswami about Vidura, for Sutta Goswami had previously informed him how Vidura left home, leaving aside all his relatives, who were very difficult to leave. Purport. The rishis headed by Sanaka were more anxious to know about Vidura, who met Maitreya Rishi while traveling to the pilgrimage sites of the world. Texts 49 through 50. Sanaka Rishi said, "Let us know, please, what topics were discussed between Vidura and Maitreya, who talked on transcendental subjects, and what was inquired by Vidura and replied by Maitreya. Also, please let us know the reason for Vidura's giving up the connection of his family members, and why he again came home. Please also let us know the activities of Vidura while he was in the places of pilgrimage." Purport. Sri Sutta Goswami was narrating the topics of the creation and destruction of the material world, but it appears that the rishis headed by Sanaka were more inclined to hear of transcendental subjects, which are on a higher level than the physical. There are two classes of men, namely those too addicted to the gross body and the material world, and others on the higher level who are interested more in transcendental knowledge. Srimad Bhagavatam gives facility to everyone, both to the materialist and to the transcendentalist. By hearing Srimad Bhagavatam in the matter of the Lord's glorious activities, both in the material world and in the transcendental world, man can derive equal benefit. The materialists are more interested in the physical laws and how they are acting, and they see wonders in those physical glamours. Sometimes, due to physical glamours, they forget the glories of the Lord. They should know definitely that physical activities and their wonders are all initiated by the Lord. The rose in the garden gradually takes its shape and color to become beautiful and sweet, not by a blind physical law, although it appears like that. Behind that physical law is the direction of the complete consciousness of the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, things cannot take shape so systematically. The artist draws a picture of a rose very nicely with all attention and artistic sense, and yet it does not become as perfect as the real rose. If that is the real fact, how can we say that the real rose has taken its shape without intelligence behind the beauty? This sort of conclusion is due to a poor fund of knowledge. One must know from the above description of creation and annihilation that the Supreme Consciousness, being omnipresent, can take care of everything with perfect attention. That is the fact of the omnipresence of the Supreme Lord. Persons still more foolish than the gross materialists, however, claim to be transcendentalists and claim to have such supreme all-pervading consciousness, but offer no proof. Such foolish persons cannot know what is going on behind the next wall, yet they are falsely proud of possessing the cosmic all-pervading consciousness of the Supreme Person. For them also, hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam is a great help. It will open their eyes to see that simply by claiming supreme consciousness, one does not become supremely conscious. One has to prove in the physical world that he has such supreme consciousness. The rishis of Naimisaranya, however, were above the gross materialists and the false transcendentalists, and thus they were always anxious to know the real truth in transcendental matters, as discussed by authorities. Text 51. Sri Sutta Goswami explained, I shall now explain to you the very subjects explained by the great sage in answer to King Parikshit's inquiries. Please hear them attentively. Purport. Any question that is put forward may be answered by quoting the authority, and that satisfies the saner section. That is the system even in the law court. The best lawyer gives evidence from the past judgment of the court without taking much trouble to establish his case. This is called the parampara system, and learned authorities follow it without manufacturing rubbish interpretations. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anandir Adir Govinda Sharva Karana Karanam Brahma Samhita 5.1. Let us all obey the Supreme Lord, whose hand is in everything, without exception. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta Purports of the second canto, 10th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Bhagavatam is the Answer to All Questions. End of the second canto.